I did a study of farm families that had a death in farming on the farm and how that has played out in their lives. And there's just lots of really heavy emotion. And my experience is even MFT students can be uncomfortable with that, but I think they handle the emotion better than people who haven't had any kind of practice experience previously. And MFT students are really, I don't know, I don't want to stereotype because I know MFT students I would rather not have interview for me, but MFT students are good at a number of things. One is often they're good with silence. Inexperienced interviewers, people who are inexperienced in dealing with people, just can be really tense with silence and start talking when it would be better to just let the silence happen and see where things go. And I also think MFT students, the ones I've worked with, are good at understanding when a question hasn't been answered.
So to take the person back.
Yeah.
Here's where we started, and we kind of got off track. And we were starting to say this, but then we didn't get there.
Yeah, and ask the question again, or hang on to the question and come back to it, 20 minutes later and say, I know I asked you this before, but I want to ask you this again. And I think that's really helpful. I've had some non-MFT, non-therapy research assistants who were doing interviewing who weren't as good at catching on when a question hadn't been answered or had been slid away from or something. And then I'm frustrated when I try to analyze that interview because I've got some missing data.
Yeah, you can't get to what you
And then some of my interview studies are individual studies, but some are couple and family studies, and I think it really helps to be an MFT and have real experience at dealing with the back and forth amongst the family members, at allowing the different voices to speak, and hearing and embracing those different voices, and catching on to when there are differences, and catching on to when, even though they sound like they're different, they're maybe not so different, and being sure that everybody gets to speak, not some people silence.
That's interesting that you talk about that, because I think that's one of the things that family therapists who are engaging in research, I think they see the value of a relational outlook or a systems perspective and understanding relationships as being interconnected. But my guess is we still do interviews with individuals.
Sure.
And so you and I spoke even briefly about, are there examples out there in qualitative research about people who are highlighting process between a husband and a wife, or a couple, or a grandparent and a grandchild? Is there much of that, or is that still maybe a cutting edge for qualitative research methods? And I guess the analogous thing for quantitative research methods would be dyadic data and triadic data. When you've got the interactions of 2 or 3 people or more that you're trying to quantify. Are people doing much of that kind of process level research in the qualitative tradition?
There are some people who are doing it. Peter Robert, who's a Belgian family therapist, has been doing it. Publishes in Family Process and JMFT. I did a couple of papers with one of our students who was not an MFT student, John Barner. Actually, he was a social work graduate student when we did the work, where we looked at process in couples where one of the partners has experienced the death of a parent. And so one issue is, what do they say about their process, and another issue is what's going on in their process now in the interview. And we did that purely qualitatively. We didn't try to put numbers to it. But I don't. For me, there's not a really good. They're not good reasons to separate qualitative from quantitative. Like, I really want to count things, and the effort to count things forces me to be clear about what I'm counting. I mean, it's an aid to thinking, if nothing else. So, like in this paper with John Barner, 2 papers with John Barner, we certainly know what we had in terms of numbers, even though we don't report numbers in the things we wrote. But maybe I'm sliding away from your question, like some interviewees do.
No, and now you're going to really put me to the test. You know, am I that good of an MFT that I could call you back to the original
Oh, well,
question?
speaking as a qualitative interviewer, sometimes I can't remember what I asked, so I don't
Yeah.
know whether people
Yeah.
have slid away from my question.
And I have enough ADD that I can't remember what I asked either, so
Yeah.
it courses through my veins. There certainly are, you've talked about some of the strengths of MFTs and some of the struggles of maybe being too interventive. What I've seen sometimes is I've seen students maybe who are running from quantitative methods, and they get the idea that because they have skills in family therapy and they can sit with people and they can hear stories and listen to people and elicit responses from people, that qualitative research methods is going to be easier for them. I try really hard to dissuade people from that kind of thinking, because I think the qualitative projects that I've been involved in, the amount of time it takes to really get to know the data and to kind of check yourself at the door or appropriately check your own biases and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that process, or that, not that process in general, but just the idea that that's extremely time consuming.
Yeah,
And
qualitative.
a lot of people don't seem to get that.
Yeah, qualitative is very time consuming. I've done, in the past 20, 30 years, I've done a few quantitative papers with other people, and it felt like cheating. We had the data, we analyzed it, we sent it off for publication, and it seemed like, it was like 2 hours of work when with a qualitative project it's weeks and weeks and weeks of work, even a simple project. What related to this, I think not everybody's good at everything. I mean, not everybody's a good interviewer, and lots of people are not good at pulling qualitative data together. And there's nothing in MFT training that tells you how to pull together data from disparate people, even though even if as an MFT you've seen a number of premarital couples who are struggling with whether to marry together or stay together or not. There's nothing in that tells you how to pull it together or why you should pull it together. And my experience is the MFT students, just like non-MFT students, really have to struggle to learn how to analyze the data and see what's there. And the thing I see often is that they're not sure what's there, and so they try to get everything down. There are a million details in these interviews, and then they get swamped by all the detail. And another possibility is to kind of punt and say, well, I don't really know what's in the data, but I'll use ambiguous loss theory or family stress theory and just put that on the data. And then they're not really hearing the data or seeing the data. They're not really understanding what they have. People may have to do that. I mean, maybe they can't think their way through to analyze the data, but I think I wouldn't assume just because somebody was a really good MFT student that person knew how to analyze the data.
Yeah, so there's a learning curve there for anybody.
Ideally there's a learning curve, and for some people there is no learning curve. It's just, it remains on the flat line.
Okay.
One thing I don't want to sell short about MFT students, a lot of them have the social skills to be caring in an interview. And I don't take that for granted. I think there are people who are just really kind of, I don't know what it is, Asperger-ish when they interview, where they're not giving a lot of emotion back to the interviewees. And the topics I study, they're all emotion laden. And I'm really grateful when an interviewer has feelings for people. I mean, really has empathy and really is genuinely connecting with people. And I think that's important. I mean, potentially we're doing not good things to people when we interview them. I mean, we're opening up doors they might not open, or we're setting up couple or family processes that we're going to say, well, you'll find some way to live with that. We're leaving now. I'm leaving now.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks
See
a
you
lot.
later.
Yeah.